So moving on, our next speaker is Chiara Lodi, who is a Policy and Research Officer at Black Southwest Network and the lead author on their recent report on the impact of COVID-19 on BAME-led businesses, organisations and communities. So Chiara has been with the Black Southwest Network since 2018, where her work has focused on identifying barriers hindering inclusive economic growth and creating evidence for the development of policy recommendations to reduce racial and socio-economic inequality. Recently, she's expanded her contribution to other key community-based research projects in Bristol, specifically the Everyday Integration in Bristol and Bristol Digital Futures projects. So over to you.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Just 1 second. Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, as was mentioned before, the research response from BSWN is focusing on, well, focused mainly on the economic impact of COVID-19. So we'll talk a little bit about key findings from this piece of work and just a couple of words on the organization before we get to the actual research bits. So you can see our mission on the screen. What we do really, BSWN is a Black-led infrastructure organization. So what we do really is connecting. We connect people, we connect communities, we create spaces where communities can have an honest and safe discussion with the decision makers. We create spaces for entrepreneurship and just developing all the potential. So you could say we also work as an incubator in that sense. So trying to stimulate innovative thinking, try to stimulate entrepreneurship within community and just research in general. Everything we do is evidence-based. So our approach is always about finding some, identifying the needs and identifying what the real, how to respond to the needs through research. So I'm really happy that I'm doing my part now after Saffron and Andrea, because there was quite a lot of information I wanted to share about pre-existing structural inequalities and how those things affect. But most of that has been covered already. So keeping that in mind, keeping all that has been said about housing, about how Black and Asian minority ethnic communities are mathematically overexposed to the virus because they are overrepresented among key workers, they are overrepresented among those type of low-income jobs that are really face-to-face with people, so overexposed to the virus. So those type of health risks and that type of trend where there is a higher health risk compared to other communities should be kept in mind when going into the economic, because it's never just about economics, it's about socio-economics always. And so just to keep that in mind for a second, and then going into what the economic aspects and trends and systemic trends are. The BME-led businesses face systemic barriers in accessing timely and accurate information, targeted support and funding and or investing opportunities. This is the key finding coming out of the BSWN 2018 research program. It's really relevant because of how the virus has exacerbated pretty much any type of systemic barriers when it comes to economics, and as I was saying, all the other aspects as well. So just keeping in mind that we're not starting with an equal ground. We're starting from a situation where just accessing information is just harder, generally speaking, and accessing support, targeted support as well. So minority ethnic entrepreneurs are overrepresented in the sectors directly hit by social distancing rules, as was explained before, food industries and retail sectors, but there's also other sectors that I will touch later on. There's definitely an overrepresentation of BME, Black and Asian minority ethnic-led businesses in these sectors. I don't know if I will have time to talk about this later on, but there's also the aspect of self-employment as well that I just want to touch briefly on. But just to keep on going on the main economic pre-existing structural type of elements. So minority ethnic workers and self-employed individuals are overrepresented across the low-income and insecure employment. So what we were saying before, there is a situation where you have all these elements coming together. So you have financial insecurity, you have the low quality housing, you have mental health, and the way that all these things are connected. And there is a double type of impact, or a multiple type of impact, really, affecting communities at the same time. And these things are affecting also the strictly economic aspect. So this quote, I think, from Runnymede summarizes really well what I'm trying to say. So structural inequalities are not only placing BME groups at higher and much higher risk of severe illness from the COVID-19, but they're also creating conditions for them to experience harsher economic impact from the government measures to slow the spread of the virus. So, as I was saying, what does this mean? There is a higher risk in terms of health, and there is also a higher impact in terms of how the response, the physical, practical response to the virus has been. So lockdown measures, basically. So because we work immersed in this data, and we have been working with this data for years, BSWN pretty much knew from the beginning that there would be a disproportionate impact on Black and Asian minority ethnic communities. So the response that we had was quite immediate, and we launched a survey immediately right after the lockdown to assess the impact of COVID-19 on BME-led businesses, social enterprises, volunteering community organizations, and self-employed minority ethnic individuals. So the response had to be very quick, because the first, I don't know if you remember the confusion and the sudden change. The first few weeks of lockdown were really were a struggle in many sense, in the sense of the communication. As I was saying before, it's a key part of our work. So we were also launching this series of virtual information sessions to try and keep the communication open and make sure that the communities were able to again access information in a timely and accurate manner especially throughout the first period of lockdown, where there was a lot of coverage from the media. There was a lot of confusion about where to go to find the data about and information, correct information, and also in terms of accessing support. And so this is just a look at the sample. We were really lucky because in 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of lockdown, we were able to get 60 plus responses to the surveys, so which was quite a balanced sample as well. So we had 35% of businesses, 18% of social enterprises and community businesses, and then the other half, 27% of self-employed and 20% of voluntary community organization responding to the survey. So I won't touch at all on the voluntary community organization because of time, but if you want, there is a full report that is available online, and I can also send it to you if you want me to, where there is an in-depth analysis of what type of impact the COVID-19 had on voluntary community organizations specifically, and the self-employed segment of working population. Finally, getting to the actual impact on the COVID-19 on businesses. So 90% among all business owners who responded to the survey indicated to have experienced significant financial loss in the first 2 weeks. 67% have had to close their businesses due to COVID-19 direct impact. Almost half of the business sample was unable to deliver products. I think just by looking at this now, you can see that the impact is completely disproportionate. That's already telling quite a lot. When we analyze, as I was saying before, we have the situation of overrepresentation across the specific sectors, such as in the food industry and retailers. When we analyze the samples specifically from those sectors, the situation is even worse. You have 100% of people responding to the surveys saying they had already experienced significant financial loss in the first 2 weeks of lockdown. 9 out of 10 have had to close down their businesses. So it's basically saying that no business was able to keep working at all, even though there were different suggestions coming from the government about home delivery and other things that were expected from the businesses to be able to work with. But there's situations where there's a lot of assumptions behind the home delivery type of methods, just because you need to have high-tech equipment and online presence to be able to work that way. There's a lot of elements as well. There are actually reasons that we were able to identify a couple of key dynamics to explain why the impact was so bad. So this quote from the first section here. The center is closed, we can't open the kitchen. So what happened here is this was a community business that was operating in a public venue. So what happened in the beginning is that all public venues and assembly venues were asked to close immediately. So businesses that were operating from these type of places, and businesses who don't own their own premises, were basically not able to access any type of their premises at all. So they had to completely stop. Unavailable supplies. So this is another type of thing that kept coming up in the qualitative comments. People struggling a lot to just afford or find any suppliers still open. I think there's also an additional element here in terms of Black and Asian minority ethnic businesses when it comes to, for example, international trading. So food industries that are offering international that need international ingredients to come in will have a double type of impact because of what happened with the flights and everything and transportation. It was just harder to get supplies anyway, and this is just a double type of impact really. Drop in sales and loss of customers. So this is so it's important to also keep in mind that Black and Asian minority ethnic led businesses are also generally small. It's a trend as well for these businesses to be small businesses. So in the first week of lockdown, what happened is that people were asked to do their shopping as quick as possible, and they just decided to, as reasonably, to go to big supermarkets where they could find everything in one space and just get everything they needed and go back home. So just after the first wave of panic buying, the small businesses were completely overlooked, and they just ended up basically losing customers like at an alarming rate. So I think this is what happened to all small businesses, but in particular, as I was saying, there's an overrepresentation of small businesses led by these communities. So due to the COVID-19, I lost 70% of trade. People aren't coming out. This is just one of the many quotes. There's a lot of quotes that I wanted to input into the PowerPoint, but I wasn't able because of time, but they're quite systemically repeating the same things. So another thing that we wanted to do, because at the beginning of the lockdown, what was available in terms of support was mainly about national financial supporting packages. And then right after, Bristol responded really well with other key actors in the city offering other type of emergency funding. But at the beginning, we were working with the national packages. So we were trying to understand if there were any systemic barriers for our communities to access that type of support. So we definitely identified quite a few, and there's a lot more in the report if you want to just refer to it. But this is one of the main one that was an issue in terms of businesses. So both the grant funding and obviously the business rate relief as well were utilizing the business rate system as the criteria to select the businesses that could apply to it. So that means that a lot of businesses were just left out because they wouldn't own their premises, or they would not be the main people, the key person paying the rate for the business. You basically, if you are working in a co-working space, if you were working in a public venue, you were basically not entitled to pretty much any type of support. So a lot of small, like one man, one woman businesses working in, especially as I mentioned here, the heritage and cultural and art sector. There's a lot of young Black entrepreneurs working in those sectors, and they don't, because of the flexibility of their businesses, they don't really need an office, and they tend to just work from co-working spaces. And they didn't receive any type of support for their businesses. They just were not eligible for any of that at the beginning of the lockdown. The discretionary fund was then created to fill in the gaps. I think it's open again now. We're looking into try and see and monitor how that went, if it was able to reach the communities that were left behind before. So we will see how that goes as well. But it was specifically designed to try to fill in the gaps, and that was a response to pieces of research like this one and others where the gaps were identified. So that's very good. Key research findings. So the research has found that the sectors where BME people are overrepresented, such as food industries, retailers, arts and culture and creative sectors, taxi drivers, I'll touch on that in a second, and other low-income jobs among the self-employed and rental spaces, and the charity sector I didn't touch, but again, you can read about that in the report, are also the ones hit the hardest by the worsening economic environment created by the COVID-19 itself and by the government response to it. At the same time, there are structural barriers hindering these sectors' access to national financial support. When it comes to the self-employed, I'll just say very quickly, it was the most worrying segment in economic entities that we were analyzing, to be honest, because there was pretty much no type of support available for low-income self-employed workers, or like people with 0-hour contracts, people with just generally, there was basically no way, even though there was so many comments and about how the type of work, for example, a taxi driver, there's a lot of South Asian communities that are overrepresented among taxi drivers and Uber drivers, and they were pretty much unable to work at all. The people were not out, and even if you had customers out, the idea of being with multiple strangers throughout the day in a very closed space is just really scary when the virus works in the way that it works. So maybe there are other conditions that we were saying before, overcrowded housing, conditions such as living with your parents, your grandparents. You get into a situation where there's so many things impacting at the same time, and it's just impossible. It was just impossible for these people to work. I don't know if the situation now has changed, but it was definitely one of the most challenging reality that we were able to capture. Our response to the findings, quickly, this is just the last one. We're doing further research. We are still monitoring what the impact of COVID has been and is right now, and how it is right now affecting the voluntary community sector in the sense of the wider sector, and try to identify some key elements and collect evidence for a recovery strategy for the sector. That will probably allow us to also monitor what the actual access rate to government funding and non-government funding has been, so that's very good. Further research, and actually Saffron is working on this one as well in partnership with us. And we're working with the University of Bristol, trying to identify the impact of COVID-19 on health. And then virtual sessions, this is just the way that PSWM works. We want to keep the communication open. We want to keep the community engagement. So we are trying to keep working on our business networks and volunteer community networks through webinar sessions. And then we just launched the Back Her Business program, which is going to focus specifically on Black female entrepreneurs. And then, accurate and timely communication, as I said already, this is key. The Food Hub Consortium is a very, very interesting project that was launched in a very spontaneous and in my opinion, beautiful way, because it's a collaborative effort with 7 local organizations, and it's a response to what the type of reality I was describing before, around the low-income workers who were pretty much not able to access, because the self-employment scheme as well from the national financial support was pretty much based on profit. So people who generally have a low income or insecure employment are really struggle to get any type of support from that. So as I was saying, this project is funded by Quartet, and we are now feeding 400 people per week. So we are very proud of it, and it's going really well. I think it will keep going until September at least. Thank you so much for listening, and I am done.
Great, thank you very much. It was really, really interesting and fit really well with the other presentations as well. So it's good to see opportunities for synergy, and obviously yourself and Saffron are already aware of one another, which is great. So we've got a few minutes before we need to move on to the final presentation. So opening up to Q&A. So if anyone's got any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A box, and I will put them to Chiara. I'm just give it a few more seconds in case again it's an internet delay, and if not, then we can move on to the next presenter and again come back to any questions at the end if we don't have any that are coming through just now. Okay, so we've got sort of more of a comment than question, but you might want to respond, from Sharon Collard, who says that she thinks national policymakers have a poor understanding of the issues Chiara raises, so this is really important research. So I don't know if you had any comment back, but yeah, it's really great that it's being taken forward.
Yeah, it's a very important comment. I think definitely that we know, historically speaking, we know that when something comes from national, it's harder for it to hit grassroots level in an appropriate way. So we know this is again an historical trend. So definitely it's a very good point. I think there's a lot more about what type of barriers were really there when the national packages came out. I'm not saying that that it was extremely appreciated but it's just how it works. I feel like there should always be some type of communication from grassroots to understand what the impact is and how to access and all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sharon's just given a quick follow-on comment saying that so anything that's published is very helpful. So thank you very much for those contributions. That's great. Thank you. Okay.